All right, so our topic today is the four states of consciousness. Some of you are familiar with this concept. If you could explore the to me state, the by me state, the through me state, and the as me state. That there are essentially four primary states of consciousness that we are moving through. Now, these are not stages of development, as we've talked about before. It's not like, oh, thank God I got to by me. Now, hopefully, by the time I'm 29, I'll get to through me. It's not like that. It's like always moving in and out of states of consciousness. And so my request of you is to just explore what state of consciousness do I find myself in this now moment? Like in this now moment, do I have the experience of life happening to me? Do I have the experience of life happening by me? All of a sudden, I've begun to wake up to myself as a creative capacity. Am I relating to life as happening through me in a surrendered state? Am I relating to life as me? There is no distinction between life and me. Just ask yourself, and likely you're having multiple experiences around different issues in your life. You could be sitting here right now having a relationship with money that feels at a to-me state of consciousness, and having an experience in your career as a by-me state of consciousness. So Gaylon, so we didn't have that up here the whole time? The to-me, by-me, through-me, as-me? I really thought I was working something out with you all. Okay, there we go. All right, so you see this, yes? You did not previously see it? Okay, great. So let me just do that again. So life is happening to me. I am at the effect of something. I am a victim of circumstance. When you begin to, well, no, you actually are. You actually, if you think no, you're delusional. You all, me all, have to-me experiences on a daily basis. Someone cuts you off, you're in a to-me state if you're in a triggered reactive experience around that. Yeah? So, to me, life is happening to me. The movement, an ascending movement, is by me. It's a waking up. Holy smokes, you mean something else is possible than being a walking reaction? Really? The possibility also exists. See, the way that this works is from to me, you go up. It's like you literally wake up. When you begin to cultivate a lived experience of a by me state, you have greater access to a through me experience, which is actually like a sitting down. It's like, conversations I've been having with people a lot these days are in by me states of consciousness. Let me just do more, be more, be more, be more, be more. I'm like, I said to a client this week actually, the best marathon you actually could run is not the one that you're scheduled to run in October. It would be the marathon of how long can you sit, because you are in a perpetual state of productivity. You don't even know yourself independent of productivity. You know? So through me begins to realize that what you're experiencing is not only from like you as a locomotion. So what do you want to say about that?
Several things.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So when you're working through these four stages of consciousness, and as Lola has already stated, we work through these different stages through different things. And when you are going from to me to by me before you get to as me, one of the things you have to recognize is you can't surrender something that you don't have control over. You know, a lot of times people walk in and they're into places like Bodhi Spiritual Center or other places of consciousness growth, and they'll say, well, I'm doing these techniques and I'm not getting the results that I desire because they haven't gone to by me. They try to jump to as me and through me without any level of control over their own thinking. So one of the things that I learned very early in my study of metaphysics is a quote from the Reverend Dr. Johnny Coleman, who was my mentor. She would tell people all the time, I am the thinker that thinks the thought that makes the thing. That's by me. I really want you to get that. I am the thinker that thinks the thought that makes the thing. That is the origin, that is the genesis of you taking your life back. All right? Before you can get to the place of surrendering to a higher power within you, you have to first of all recognize that thoughts are things. You have to recognize, first of all, that you are a co-creator with life and that you are manifesting life by the way you think, feel, and by what you say and do. Would you put my quote up there, please, Nick? The Michael Beckwith quote. All right. Beckwith wrote, embodying and living from the realization that they are co-creative beings with dominion over their life structures, manifestors begin to reap the benefits of self-empowered living. With a growing understanding that thoughts reproduce after their own kind, they begin setting intentions and activating them through visualization and affirmation. The term metaphysics enters their vocabulary. Leave that up just for a second, because I want to just get to the place of embodying and living from, because that's key. Embodying, taking on this as your truth, and then living from the realization. Now, there is a difference between revelation and realization. I'm sure you have people saying, I know I saw this, I had a vision. That's a revelation. But until you embody it and start to live it, it's not your realization. And the realization allows you to then become a manifester or a co-creator where you're not living from a victim mindset.
I oftentimes say lots of people have lots of ideas in the shower.
Yes.
But far fewer people get out of the shower and then actually become the thing that could realize the vision. How many times have you gotten a brilliant idea in the shower? So many.
Yes. So when you start thinking about being a manifester, one of the things that I often remember is this thing that we teach people in this Basic Truth Principles class where I come from. When we tell people that the primary cause of suffering is your forgetfulness of your divine nature as a spiritual being with dominion over your thoughts and feelings. If I don't know who I am, then I believe life is happening to me. I can only begin to manifest or create the experiences that I desire by realizing that I have the capacity to do so. That is the origin of the awakening.
So this next state of consciousness, again, not relating to these as linear, is through me. And there's a great quote out of The Science of Mind by Ernest Holmes. It's one of my favorite books. And he talks about this idea of we need not coerce, we do not create the power, but we must let this great power operate through us. There is this great paradox. Like, you are the presence of all that is. You are the God body. You are the manifestation of this infinite reality, but not at the level of personality. You have a personality, and that's a beautiful thing, but something else is moving. You don't breathe you, is how I oftentimes explain this. Something is breathing you. It is not separate and apart from you. So for me, in a lot of stuff that I'm moving through in my own life right now, I'm noticing, I have such a good muscle around creating. That by me consciousness, that is so well exercised for me. But I've really been getting the sense that that's not the next game for me. The next game is really allowing, surrendering, letting, You know, on my work that I prepared for moving into this calendar year, I just kept seeing everywhere, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go, let go. And that can feel scary. You know, when you know yourself as a creator, to actually move into a kind of surrender, which is very different than apathy, very different quality.
Yeah, and I think the reason why we have challenges surrendering is because we don't like to feel vulnerable. There are times in our lives when we have allowed ourselves to become vulnerable to other people who might have been functioning at different stages of consciousness, primarily the to me. And in that victim and victimizer consciousness, what ends up happening is you allow yourself to become vulnerable, and then somebody potentially abuses that trust. And then someone says, you need to become vulnerable and surrender to the spirit within. Whoa, what is this? I need to keep my control measures. Don't tell me to let it go after it's taken me so much work to get it together. But this is...
It really did take a lot of work for me to get it together. I mean, you were right.
Yeah, so this is the paradox. I've been explaining to several of my friends lately that there's an intimacy of spirit that goes beyond words and thoughts. You have to get to the by me so you can get to the place to where you can see it. You can't see from to me to as me or through me. It's just not, it's just too, it's like in Star Wars when they do the hyperdrive and they go from light speed from one place to another. That's a light speed jump. You have to get your mind under control and put your life together, and then you're asked to give it up. This is how the Judeo-Christian tradition teaches it. Abraham, you've been praying for this son for years. This is not a literal story, by the way. This is an allegory. It's to teach a lesson. Abraham's 100 years old. Sarah's 80 years old. We finally got the baby. Isaac was born. Isaac in Hebrew means joy. That Isaac was their joy. But the attachment to it. Then Spirit says, take him to the mountain and sacrifice him. What? I've been praying for this. I've been working on this. This has been my heart's desire. Sacrifice it. And the willingness to sacrifice, what you discover is anything that's supposed to be in your life in the right way. You don't have to surrender. And there's always a ram in the bush. So you'll see stages of these levels of consciousness being taught allegorically through narratives that tell us that anything that we allow the human personality to attach to at a level that ends up being before the spiritual intention that resides in our souls will be asked to surrender to put it back in place.
Mm-hmm. So on that note, what are your thoughts? Yeah, so the idea is we really would love to have, one of the things that I've been enjoying less and less is talking at and preferring talking with. So, there's an opportunity to submit questions online. There are 2 mic runners on each side of the room. If there's something that you're navigating, that you're wanting support around, then we want to support you in shifting that. In what I know is that any question that's asked, there's some gift for all of us. So Carissa.
Thanks. In what's coming up for me is like this idea, when you're in a community like this and you understand the law of attraction and blah, 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 right? You get it. You're like, I'm going to attract some shit today, like a green sweater. There it is. Then when you're looking at the bigger things of like, I'm calling in a partner, I'm calling in this job, I'm going to create this whole realm that has never existed for me before. There's like a line in the paradox where it's like, okay, you can like bypass yourself when you are so attached to the law of attraction, which is like, then you can't surrender. Does that make sense?
I think so. What's your question?
So to talk about that. Like that,
Great.
that place.
Okay, I think where
Do
you're
you know
coming
what I'm
from
saying?
is, I think where you're coming from is, you learn these materials, this information. You're a part of this conversation about
You do the
universal
work.
laws and et cetera, et cetera. And then you're looking up and saying, okay, how come it works here with the smaller things, and it's not working here with some of these things that really matter to me? Would that be?
It still can work, but it's the question is around the surrender, because like I feel like the law of attraction kind of mentality can get into the way. Like it's like, well, no, I focused this long and this hard, and I know these things are coming, but if I let go mentally of like what I'm drawing in, and I can't step back, it actually can't. There's no room for it to come in.
Okay, so here's the thing. This is what I always explain to people, because we get kind of caught up. What's your name?
Carissa.
Carissa?
Yes.
Yeah, Carissa. This is where we get caught up. There is no law of attraction in you. All right? There's just the law as you. You are the law of your own being. We get caught up through these books. It's 11 laws, it's 15 laws, it's 12 laws. There's one law, the law of your consciousness. And all of these ways and books and things of that nature are just ways of explaining you. All right? That's all it's just the elephant. I'm touching the leg, I'm touching the trunk, I'm touching the side, I'm touching the tail, and saying that's what an elephant looks like. That's what we do to the universe. That's what we do to God. That's what we do to ourselves. So first of all, let me just say that. The second thing I would say is this. With that paradox change, potentially what this is what this gives you. If I'm the law of my own being, if I am always my own experience, as a part of my own individual life and as a part of a collective consciousness, then that which I am creating has its own stages. Now, what I would suggest would be this, because I think you want some practical, pragmatic answers. Let me give you one. A couple of things have just popped up. Two things. One, I want you to go to a store and buy a bunch of greeting cards.
Okay.
And I just listen, buy a bunch of greeting cards. And I want you to anonymously send them to people that you really like and some people that you've possibly had some issues with in the past. Google them if you need to know their address. But this is what I want you to do. I want you to write something really nice and don't put your name on it, so your ego can't take credit. Because we love to give, I let this person off the hook. Look how righteous I am. Now, what does this have to do with what you're saying? What it's saying is it's a step and stage in surrendering. The need to be recognized even when you're holy. Second thing. Second thing, because that's a real practical exercise. When I come back, I'm going to be looking for you. That's why I asked your name.
What's your address?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you get a card, she didn't play the game.
Yeah. Send it to Christ Universal Temple. You can Google it.
Put some money in it.
Yes. That would be a better thing. Second quick thing, so we can go on to the next question, would be sit down and write a list of, play the game of if money wasn't an issue, if time wasn't an issue, if whatever you think is holding you back wasn't an issue, I would do. And just complete it. Because now you're stepping out of just, I'm trying to make life happen, and seeing what is really trying to be born in you. Mm-hmm. All right? Those are two things.
All right.
And I'm waiting for my card.
Let's ask another question. Who else has a question? Right here, Jay.
Hi, my name's Josh.
Hi, Josh.
So for me, I learn these lessons through pain, and I learn what is for me through pain, unfortunately, by going to the wrong thing many, many, many times, and then through humility, finding where I should be. Is there another way to do this?
Yeah, I have two thoughts about that. Number one, Ernest Holmes says, we actually have learned all that we need to learn through suffering. So you actually don't have to evolve through the contrast of pain. And Gay and Katie Hendricks would say that is the fundamental upper limit. That we actually have the capacity to experience good and greater good and greater good and greater good, but because we have been conditioned and programmed by pain as required contrast, we manufacture pain to work out our growth. You actually could have an eternally positive experience of life, but similar to the last question, who you would become or who you would have to be would be distinct from who you are now. So it's actually a great, like, would you be willing to consider that pain is not necessary? Yes. We've actually historically said pain is inevitable, suffering is by choice. But I would actually go so far as to say is pain actually doesn't even need to exist. You know, one of the things that we practice a lot here is the practice of body sensation. So we do this thing called presencing, body sensation, feeling state, next thought. And the very first thing we practice in body sensation is describing the actual sensation. It is extremely difficult for people to omit words like hurt, sore, pain. It's like so hard for people to develop that skill because we don't actually know what life is like without pain, which is not the nature of life. It's literally a program that has been conditioned.
One quick thing. Be careful that you don't get the high from the emergency.
Yes.
Some of us get the high from knowing that we can produce under pressure.
Yes.
And Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People 4 quadrants, and one of them is urgent and emergency. You know, that you have, you know, when you step out of the emergency phase of life, what it allows you to do is look at what you really want to give birth to, as I mentioned to Carissa earlier. I would suggest you do the same exercise, because if you're doing that exercise, what you're not doing is allowing life to react and then saying, okay, I get my high from making stuff happen and pulling rabbits out of the hat and creating miracles. That's a real thing for our society right now. But it doesn't allow for contemplation. It doesn't allow for reflection. It doesn't allow for the intuitive knowing to function outside of the mental noise of the timeline. You know, as Beckwith says often, pain pushes until vision pulls.
Yeah, and the thing is that, to go to your earlier point, like, you can't jump from to me to as me. Right. So if you hear what I say and say, oh, pain is not necessary, then all of a sudden today, I'm going to start walking in a positive experience. If you have spent the last 40, 50, 60 years believing that pain is real, the odds of you just making a leap to pain as not being real is impossible. You have to recondition your mind. So it's a practice. All right, another question, thought? Yeah, David?
Hi. My experience has been of doing the work and coming to Bodhi and then nothing's happening. And my question is, like, how you mentioned some really great things about, like, if money and time weren't an issue. Could you talk a little bit more about making the shift between to me, by me, and then by me and through me? Like, how to do that consciously?
I mean, my first thought, just having watched your journey, and I think it's very, very familiar for so many of us, like, being able to distinguish your identity from your essence. So when your doingness is coming from your ego or your identity, I would say pause. Now, if you don't have the ability, not you specifically, but the general you, don't have the ability to distinguish between your essence and your ego, or your essence and your identity, it becomes very difficult to know which one is speaking. Do you have a thought?
Yes. So one of the things that happens many times is we come here to places like this, and we metaphorically have a can of soup, and we take the label off, we change the label, and now we call it pineapples. What does that mean? What it means is the belief system is still the same, and it's surfacely been changed. But when you start to deal with the real things that are going on in you, what ends up happening is this type of work, the by me stage, could you put the 4 stages back up, please, just so I can reference it? The by me stage pulls up something that state pulls up something that we call, in my brand of metaphysics, chemicalization. What does that mean? That means that you learn to go from to me to by me, and you're in the space now where you've made some things happen at a surface level, but now you have to deal with the deeper beliefs, because now that you've taken some measure of control over your life and over your mind, now you have to deal with the things that have been suppressed. And that level of intention starts to pull that material up out of the subconscious. And now it has to be healed. So what it looks like is I came to a place and I'm learning about the truth of God in me and how I have power in my mind and in my thoughts, and then all heck breaks loose. Why? It's come up to be healed. So what we do is we panic and we suppress it back down until the next thing, and then it pulls up. So what I would say is this, and I don't know you at all. Look at what needs to be forgiven. I call forgiveness the liquid Plumr of the soul. I don't care how good your pipeline is. If it's good in the pipeline, the water can be great, the pipeline can be great, and it will stop up the natural flow. Notice what I said, the natural flow. There's a natural flow to life. There's a natural flow to you. You were created to and designed to work with a flow. So when we see obstructions in our lives, there's obstructions in our belief systems that have to be addressed. And what that means is, you at this stage, you have to, at the by me stage, you have to be really intentional about the forgiveness practices. Now, I know that they have classes and courses here that offer those type of things, and you can drill down with your leadership at a deeper level. But let me just give you this one quote from Gerald Jampolsky from a book called Forgiveness. He wrote, "Forgiveness means giving up all hope for a better past." See, what we do is we're still manipulating in our mind woulda, shoulda, coulda. And that's to me. So as Lola was saying earlier, we want to live in the by me, but we keep dipping into the to me because we have this story that we've made up that mama, daddy, life, me, school, significant others, or whatever should have been something other than what they are. And the release of that allows the process of healing to truly happen. And also, just saying this, and just because this is my belief, Lola knows I say this all the time. Sometimes people in progressive spiritual movements are the most sensitive folks on the planet, with an empowered message being triggered by everything.
So what do you have to say about that?
I know you have.
What I am saying, yeah.
I mean, I sort of want to hear you say the next thing that you're thinking.
So the next thing is this. Part of discovering the truth and power within yourself is walking, talking, thinking, feeling, and believing from that empowerment. All right? So for instance, when I was a young African-American man and people were saying, African-American males are endangered species. Let me look that up. I'm not an endangered species. I'm not affirming that for myself. All right? That's a mindset that you have to shift. I'm not going to allow somebody else's label to disempower me because now I have to live out that label. So every time you accept somebody else's limitation and you allow yourself to be triggered by it, you have to have the experience of the limitation. So what I'm saying is, when you get to this by me, and this, I'm still at the by me, is being intentional with creating the type of consciousness that you desire, releasing the things that need to be released, not at the surrender stage, but the beliefs that don't correspond with what you're seeking to manifest in your life. This is why you might have to do the affirmations and the denials and the visualizations and the classes and the workshops and the seminars and the reading and staying up and working on you to the place in which you can refine your consciousness to produce results that you desire. But if you want to do this process and still be a victim and still talk about what other people are saying and what other people are doing, you can't walk in your power.
One of the things that you said on the Facebook Live that we did the other night was someone's going to condition your mind. It may as well be you.
Yes.
So if you're not in an active practice of conditioning your mind, then you're essentially giving license to other stimulus to do that for you.
Yes.
What else is coming up?
There was a lady over here with a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So when trauma happens before the brain is developed, how would one move?
Can you hold the mic up closer?
Yeah, sorry. So when one has trauma done to them before the brain is fully developed, but then you don't realize until much later in life that you've been stuck in that, how does one move through that or get to the other side of that?
So I'm going to say the least popular thing, perhaps, especially for mental health professionals in the room. If who you are is that, it's very difficult. But if you actually have a context that who you are is greater than that, there's much more available. So if we only relate to ourselves in this dimension of reality, that becomes like a science question. But if you relate to yourself as an eternal being, an infinite expression of life itself, which, by the way, does not mean that there's not great value in mental health services. But, you know, my experience is that so often people are doing mental health work at a very superficial level and then are frustrated that things don't shift. Because you're only dealing with a very limited aspect of your being. If you have a context of who you are as greater than this, many more options become available.
Yeah, and also what I would add is a couple of things, really quickly. One, I am not my brain, I am not my body.
Exactly.
That by itself is a paradigm shift, all right? Because if you can set intention to heal lungs, like I did 20 plus years ago when I almost died from an asthma attack. I know people who have allowed limbs to work in ways that they didn't work previously. Body is at the realm of effect. Even scientists and quantum physicists are saying there is consciousness that works through the body. The brain does not produce consciousness. The brain is more like a radio or a receiver that receives consciousness that it flows through. Now, if the brain or the receiver, like anything else, has any levels of damage, it interrupts the signal. So what we have to do then is, and this is not the platform to really drill down on this, because I just want to give you a surface answer. I don't want to give you a surface answer, but it has to be quick, is to, the first step, as Lola stated, is to recognize that I'm a spiritual being living in a spiritual universe governed by spiritual law. Now, what does that mean? That means that the essence of me has never been traumatized. It means the essence of me is perfect, whole, and complete. And I choose, now notice the word choose, I choose to identify with my wholeness. Mm-hmm. All right? That has to be the first step, because none of the techniques work without the choice of identifying with your wholeness. and then the work, whether you're working with a mental health professional or a practitioner or a spiritual guru, it doesn't make a difference. The choice still has to be made that am I going to live from the standpoint of being a victim? And what I tell people is this, I'm known for saying this statement. I believe that there's something radically right about you. The world will tell you that there's something wrong with you. Religion will tell you, philosophy, society, sociology, medicine. But I believe there's something radically right about you. And if you can connect, and how do you connect? This is why you do the work. The study, the prayer, the affirming, the visualizing, the visioning, the meditating. These are conscious techniques you use to learn about the you might not be familiar with right now. But it's an intimacy. It's like, picture if you wanted to date the higher self. If you're dating someone, there's an intimacy in learning about how they move, right? Would you agree with that statement? All right. How does spirit move in you? There's an intimacy to it. Now, what I'm saying right now might be well over somebody else's head because you're into me. What do you mean how spirit moves through me? Because as Lola mentioned earlier with her client, we don't slow down and stop long enough to be with ourselves without judgment.
So 2 more questions. There's one right here.
Hi there, I'm Marie, and it's my first day with you all, so it's a pleasure being here.
Welcome.
And I have been noticing, I think similar to nature, you have a beautiful tree that provides shelter and breathes oxygen into this beautiful world. And when a storm comes through, it can become a nursing log. So this duality with nature, I think, is reflected within my own being as well, of being so grateful just to be here, to be alive. And I have a wonderful job that allows me to know if I can take off and land safely, no matter what happens between, I'm alive. But then there's a part that has been very grateful and yet wanting more. So this deep level of contentment, and then
Divine discontent.
yes, and with the interwoven tapestry of the states of consciousness that we go in and out of in each moment, at our essence, when we are there, even if it's just for a moment, is there that, not, I don't want to say struggle, but the, tug of war, I suppose that's a colloquial way of saying it, of wanting more and being content. And how do we know, and how can we balance within these two, I think, wonderful places to just, like, what's that in between?
Answer that first.
Please.
So what was your name?
Marie.
Marie. So Marie.
We'd like her to come back.
Yes.
You'll see me. You'll see me.
I'm just kidding.
Be careful, careful.
Okay, level down.
No, please.
Level down.
Bring up the intensity. I
Okay.
will come back.
The myth of life is perfect balance. It's a myth. I was watching Good Morning America this morning, and we're talking about the people walking in New York from one building to the next. And they have the large pole, and they were walking on the wire. Why do they have the large pole? It balances them. But even with the large pole and all of that skill, as they're walking the tightrope, it's a step, and it's a step, and it's a step. Every step of your life, you're going to have to create the balance. We think let me rephrase this. We interpret conflict as struggle. But conflict is just competing needs, values, and wants. You want something, I want something. I think it's right, you think it's wrong. And all of this could be happening between individuals or inside one individual, which is what you're talking about. And what I would say is love it all. Even as you have to sit down what no longer serves you. But guess what? As you sit it down, something within you is going to be striving for something else because you are an ever evolving being in the process of becoming. You will never become. You will always be in the process of becoming because you are the image and likeness of infinity. So when you look at it from that way, from that standpoint, there is no such thing as complete contentment. Because there will always be something pushing you to grow, pushing you to release, and pushing you to evolve into whatever is seeking to be born through you. So this is a natural process. And if you judge it as something else, you will create a story that will put you in bondage.
All right, so we're going to
I
take
have a question.
Well, Amira, you have a microphone. Okay, look, we're going to do one question from online, and then we'll close with your question. Is that
Okay.
good? All right, go ahead.
Okay, we have one from Charisse L. Says, to Gaylon's point of being triggered and getting stuck in a space of blaming or accepting the other's projection of our identity, how do we actually move forward from there? The immediate reaction for me is anger, for example, of someone calling me pretentious when I express my confidence. One thing that I'm trying to build, my confidence. So yes, I am triggered. How do I allow myself to feel the emotion without trying to jump to this greater spiritual being that I am obviously not yet?
So I would say you are a great spiritual being. You haven't fully realized it, perhaps, and that's where the practice lies. This is this idea of, I was with a client the other day, and I said, do you have a rubber band? And he gave me the rubber band. And I said, now if I take the rubber band and I make it larger at a pace that's friendly to the rubber, it's actually very gracious with me. It stretches with me. If I take the rubber band and I go like this, it snaps like that. So that is true for each of us. You can stretch gently in to this experience, as opposed to being like, ah!
Yes, I want to give her, Charisse L., a real practical exercise. I want you to look up A Complaint-Free World by Will Bowen. In A Complaint-Free World, the book basically is based on the premise that we are very unconscious. And we have to learn how to become conscious of our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and actions through our words. So what he does in the book is this. He says, put on a wristband. He sells them that says Spirit, but you can use any wristband that you choose. And every time you complain, every time you throw shade, every time you, now let me say this, verbalize it, not think it, verbalize it. You switch the wristband from one wrist to another. What does that do? It's a conscious act. And the idea is to go 30 days without switching your wristband.
It's also mental conditioning.
It's mental conditioning. Now, if you think it and don't say it, it doesn't count. But the moment it leaves your lips, switch the wristband. What does that do? It will show you how often your belief systems go back to me. Because part of your evolution, as Lola mentioned earlier, is you catching yourself when you're doing it. That's stage one. It's sort of like unconscious incompetence. That's where most people function when they're just reacting. The next stage would be conscious incompetence. I know I don't have this, but I'm still incompetent. The next stage would be conscious competence. Now I know what I'm doing, and I have to choose it consistently until you can live in unconscious competence, which allows you to subconsciously and automatically do the thing that you designed and conditioned yourself to do and be. As I said earlier, or as Lola quoted me, somebody's going to condition your mind. It might as well be you. So Charisse L., I'm challenging you to take on the Complaint-Free World Challenge.
Well, I also think another great tool is nonverbal body movement and sound. So if an experience is happening The idea is not to suppress it, because if you suppress it, it actually calcifies in your body. So there's something between not experiencing it and blurting it, and the in-between is, "Ugh!" You know, like you're having an experience. To pretend like you're not is to actually trap it further in your body. So give yourself an outlet, and there's something to be responsible for. All right, Amira, close us out.
Okay. Why do we have thoughts in the shower? I was just trying to, no, that's not my question. I was just trying to see if you guys were paying attention.
I was about to give you a for real.
Yeah, like I actually do have a thought about that.
Thank
You're
you
open
for
and
actually,
available, actually. You're open and available. You have access to a different level of creativity. You know, so you're in the present moment differently. So I actually think it's a great question.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Okay, but the other question is, can we get that slide back up about
To me, by me, the 4 states of consciousness.
Yeah. Okay, so by me, Lola, you said that you're really strong in that, right? And then there's this letting go.
Mm-hmm.
How do you let go?
Well, so number one, I should say, my father is an entrepreneur. And if you're going to actually succeed as an entrepreneur, you better have buy me down. Because that's all a mind game. So I was raised in a household with strong buy me consciousness. So that's like in my DNA. Because you can't take a leap as an entrepreneur and not have a right mindset. Anybody who's ever tried to become an entrepreneur and not have your mind right, it is massive levels of suffering. So for me, because I have a deeply intimate relationship with my ego and my essence, and I have a high capacity to discern which one is operating, for me, if I know that the movement, the next action is coming from ego, I don't do it. Because it's not, I'm not here for that. So it's, my through me is actually very developed, and it's just about honoring it more and more and more and more and more. Like in this time of transition here, there are lots of things that people are wanting, but if it's not authentic for me and they're being asked of me, that is a house built on sand. So I have to listen until what's true for me is a resonant match with what's wanted, and that's a through me practice. All right, so with that in mind, I would love to just appreciate the willingness to do this banter. And just appreciate your willingness to always create and play and affirm who I am on the planet. This is, in this iteration of Bodhi, this is Gaylon's last Sunday with us. And so, right. So in this iteration, and the last 6 years, I will celebrate 7 years in a staff capacity at Bodhi in December, on December 15th. And, who you've been for me is just like an affirmation of my existence. Always standing for me being my greatest self. So I just have nothing but huge amounts of gratitude for your own personal practice and the generosity with which you devote yourself here and to me personally.